The morning of March 4th, 2024, I got to the office before Derek did. That almost never happened. Derek liked being there first. He liked having his coffee already poured when I walked in, mug handle turned just so, that particular angle he always used. He liked the routine of it. I think the routine made him feel like things were normal. I set 2 items on his desk before he arrived, a file box and a manila folder. Then I stood there and waited. When Derek walked in and saw me standing behind his desk, he stopped in the doorway for maybe 2 full seconds. 2 seconds is not a long time, unless you're the one standing there and you already know everything in that folder and the other man doesn't know that you know yet. Then 2 seconds is enough time to see a face change in a way you can't describe. Let me back up. Welcome to Real Life Verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. My name is Raymond. I am 64 years old. I have been a licensed electrician since I was 26. I spent 38 years working for other people, pulling wire in new construction, running service panels in commercial buildings, troubleshooting things in walls that other people had put there wrong the first time. I wore out 3 pairs of Klein pliers before I bought my 4th pair in 1994, and I still carry those same pliers in my truck cab. The rubber grip is cracked on the left jaw. I know exactly where the crack is without looking. I started my own firm at 51, a single van and a toolbox and a contractor's license with my name on it. By the time this story takes place, I had a crew of 8, 2 cargo vans, a bucket truck, and a list of municipal contracts that took me 4 years to earn. I bid fair. I finished on time. I kept the license spotless. In this business, that is most of what you need. 2 Thursday evenings a month, I taught the apprentice-level wiring course at the county Vowtech. Same room, same curriculum, same beat-up Klein tools I used on jobs for 30 years. I showed students how to strip wire and bend conduit, how to identify a short in a 3-way switch circuit before it burns something down. The county didn't pay me for that. I didn't ask them to. I live alone. I have since 2016. My daughter Amy lives 4 states away with her own family. We talk twice a month. The house is paid off. I want you to understand the kind of man I am describing, not because it matters in a sentimental way, because what a man pays attention to is not separate from who he is. It is exactly who he is. Derek Pullman came into my business in 2021. I brought him in. That is something I want to be clear about. He didn't talk his way in. I found him. We were picking up municipal contracts faster than I could estimate and bid them while also running job sites. And I needed someone who could handle the back office, invoicing, accounts payable, subcontractor coordination. Derek had 10 years of experience on the administrative side of a construction operation. He came with references. I called every one of them. He took a 30% equity stake in the net profits in exchange for no capital, no cash investment, just his time and his knowledge. I kept majority control. I stayed on the tools. Derek was organized. He was prompt. He had a system for everything. In the mornings he came in, poured his coffee, and before he took the first sip, he turned the mug handle to exactly 9 o'clock. Same angle every day. It was the kind of habit you notice but don't comment on. The kind that makes a man seem like someone who cares about how things are arranged. I noticed it the second week he worked for me. For about 1.5 years, I had no reason to look at him differently than I looked at any other competent man I'd hired. He processed invoices on time. He kept the subcontractor relationships organized. The bids went out clean when I came in from a job site with mud on my boots. Derek was at his desk with his coffee at 9 o'clock and the paperwork in order. That felt like a good arrangement. I thought it was. One evening in late April 2023, I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of the county library job, running through the week's invoices on my phone before I drove home. Standard practice for me. It has been standard practice since before I ever had a partner. That habit is important. I'll explain why later. I pulled up a new invoice from a subcontractor called J&R Mechanical Services. 8 hours of HVAC coordination billed at $75 an hour. Total charge, $600. The billing date was April 18th, and the job listed was the library renovation. I sat there in the truck. I knew the library project that week. I had been on that site myself. The HVAC subcontractor had been delayed. I remembered that specifically because it had shuffled the crew schedule and I'd had to redirect 2 of my electricians. My crew had done the coordination work themselves that day. No outside labor. I had been standing 20 feet away when they did it. I didn't call Derek. I didn't send him an email. I drove home. A few weeks later, in early May, there was a bid meeting for a new job. Derek and I sat across from each other at the table with the proposal in front of us. I pointed to a line item that didn't look right to me, a materials estimate that seemed high based on what I knew the job would require. Derek glanced at it, waved a hand, and said, "You worry about the jobs. I'll worry about the paperwork." He said it lightly, like a man telling his business partner to stay in his lane, like the most reasonable thing in the world. I nodded and let it go. I want you to understand something about me. I did not nod because I was satisfied with that answer. I did not let it go because I believed him. I let it go because I already had a question I needed to answer before I opened my mouth, and that question required time and paper and silence. A man who starts talking before he has what he needs is a man who tips his hand. I have never tipped my hand in 38 years of doing this work, and I was not going to start then. But something had changed. I want to be honest about that. The morning after that meeting, when Derek poured his coffee and turned the mug handle to 9 o'clock and took his first sip, I watched him the same way I had always watched him. He couldn't have told the difference. But I was watching differently. After you're gone, a question stays open. And that question was, why was that invoice for work my own crew did? Three weeks after that bid meeting, on a Saturday morning when Derek wasn't in the office, I sat down with the invoice files for April and the first 2 weeks of May. I found 2 more. One from Tri-State Drywall Finishing, billed to a job that I knew required no drywall work of any kind. One from another name I hadn't seen before, for a job site where I had been on the ground every day that week and seen no outside contractor come through. Both invoices had been paid. Both had my approval signature on them because I had approved them without question at the time, the way I approved every invoice Derek submitted, quickly because I trusted the system I thought we had. I sat with those 3 invoices for a while. Total fabricated charges across those first weeks, $1,840. I went home. I opened my laptop. I created a new spreadsheet. The column headers were date, job name, subcontractor billed, amount, actual work performed by. I entered 3 rows, saved the file, closed the laptop. I did not call Derek. I did not go into the office Monday with anything different on my face. I had one more thing I needed to understand before I did anything at all, and I had only just started understanding it. Now, before I tell you how this unfolded, I have to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to keep trusting someone you knew had already broken that trust? Because stopping too soon meant losing everything you'd built? Because acting before you had everything meant they'd walk away clean? Drop a comment below and tell me how you handled it. Subscribe if you're new here. We cover real situations with real stakes, and we're just getting to the part where this story gets complicated. Let's keep going. By the end of June 2023, I had 6 fraudulent invoices documented in my spreadsheet. Total, over $4,000 Each one was for work that either my crew had performed themselves or work the job required no one to perform at all. I began keeping the spreadsheet and printed copies of the invoices in a locking file box at home. The file box stayed at home. Derek had access to the office files. He did not have access to my kitchen table. I want you to stay with me here because this is where everything I thought I understood started to come apart and reassemble into something else. The first thing I noticed was the name rotation. Derek wasn't reusing the same fake subcontractor. Every few invoices, a new name appeared. J&R Mechanical, Tri-State Drywall Finishing. Then new names I hadn't seen before. Small companies. The kind that might exist in a regional directory and might not. The kind that a man who trusted his partner wouldn't bother to verify. The second thing I noticed was the discipline of the amounts. Nothing over $1,000 on a single invoice. Most of them between $400 and $900. Small enough to fit inside normal subcontractor variation. Big enough to add up. 11 months at that rate adds up to something significant, and Derek knew it. He was pacing himself. The third thing I noticed was this. The invoices always came for jobs where outside labor would be plausible. Not the electrical work, that was mine, but HVAC coordination, site prep, material staging. Categories where a subcontractor might reasonably appear. Categories where a partner who trusted you wouldn't think to check the gate log. I wondered more than once if I was seeing something that wasn't there. A man who's been a tradesman for 38 years, who spent those years with his hands in walls and conduit and wire. It is reasonable to ask himself whether he is misreading a spreadsheet. I asked myself that. I took the 6 invoices and I drove to the 4 job sites that were still active, and I stood in those parking lots, and I read the crew timesheets I had kept from those exact dates. Then I pulled the gate sign-in logs from the 2 secured municipal sites, where every person entering the property had to record their name and company at the checkpoint. Not one of Derek's named subcontractors had signed in on the days their invoices said they were there. Not one. I went to the county clerk's office in September. I pulled our partnership agreement. I confirmed what I already knew but needed documented. Derek had contributed no capital. His 30% equity was in net profits only. No claim to the physical assets. No claim to the business name. No claim to the accounts receivable. I made a copy and put it in the file box. By October, my spreadsheet had 14 invoices totaling $11,200. Every invoice was contradicted by at least 3 independent records. I had job logs. I had crew timesheets. I had gate sign-ins from secured sites, each one a separate piece of paper that said the same thing. This work was never done by the person who billed for it. Derek didn't know about any of it. That was his mistake, and it wasn't a small one. There was something he didn't know about me, something I hadn't told him when we formed the partnership, and something I had never mentioned in 3 years of working together. But I want you to understand first what it cost me to carry that file box for 9 months while sitting across from this man at bid meetings and morning coffee and Friday afternoon invoices. It cost something. I am not going to name what it cost, but it cost something. I took the file box to Joanne Brenner on December 30th, 2023. Joanne had been my accountant for 19 years. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain. She had a copy of the state contractor licensing code on her desk that she'd owned since 1998, the spine creased in 8 places and the cover stained with old coffee rings. She knew my business the way a doctor knows a patient she's been seeing for 2 decades. Not from what you tell her, but from what the numbers say, when you're not trying to impress anyone. I set the file box on her desk. I laid out the spreadsheet. I gave her Derek's tax filings from the previous 2 years, which showed no prior relationship with any of the 8 subcontractor names he'd used. Joanne spent 40 minutes going through it. She used a calculator. She asked 3 questions. Did you approve these invoices? Yes. Did you sign off on payments? Yes. Do you have proof the work was performed differently? Yes. She put her glasses back on the chain and looked at me across the desk. Then she said, "You've got 'em cold, Ray. Now don't do anything stupid." She prepared a second set of books. Every fraudulent invoice isolated by date, job name, subcontractor name, and dollar amount. She notarized my signed statement of findings. I walked out of her office that morning with a legal record prepared by a licensed CPA that said, in professional language and with professional precision, exactly what Derek Pullman had done. Now I need to tell you the thing Derek didn't know about me, the contractor I worked for before I went out on my own. Good man, good operation, 12 employees. He went under in 2008, not because the work dried up, because he didn't watch the money. He didn't check the invoices closely. He trusted the people he'd hired to handle the office, and by the time he saw the cash flow problem, it was too late to fix it. 12 people lost their jobs. I lost mine. I watched a man who did good work lose everything he'd built because he stopped paying attention to the numbers. I swore the day I got my contractor's license that I would never be blind to the money. Not once, not for a single invoice. Every invoice that goes out of my business, I read. Every payment that comes in, I see. Every line item that doesn't match what I know happened on a job site, I notice. I have done this since the first day I opened my doors. Derek assumed that a man who wore a tool belt and ran job sites was too focused on the work to read the paperwork. He assumed that trust meant inattention. He assumed that because I let him handle the invoicing, I had stopped watching it. He had been wrong about that since his first day in my office. And that is why I had 19 invoices in a locking file box instead of 0. On January 24th, 2024, I sat at my kitchen table and counted 19 invoices. Total fraudulent billing, $16,490. I wrote the number on the inside cover of the file box. I closed it. I did not open it again to add anything. On February 16th, Derek submitted one more invoice. Greenway site cleaning, $720. I approved it without comment. That brought the total to $17,210. 2 weeks later, I went to Signature Bank at 7:15 in the morning and transferred the full $47,000 balance from the business operating account to a new account I had opened the previous week at a credit union across town. Derek had signatory authority on the Signature Bank account. After that morning, the Signature Bank account held nothing. Then I drove to the office. I set the file box and the manila folder on Derek's desk. I stood behind it and waited. When Derek walked in and saw me, he stopped in the doorway. 2 seconds. Then he came in. He set his coffee down. He reached for the mug handle. I let him turn it to 9 o'clock. I opened the manila folder. I slid 3 documents across the desk to him. The partnership dissolution agreement, already signed by me and notarized by Joanne. The second set of books showing 19 fraudulent invoices totaling $17,210.10, and a single-page summary sheet listing every fake subcontractor name, the job it was billed to, and the date. Derek looked at the papers. He did not look at me. I said, "I've been worrying about the paperwork too." I let him read. When he started to speak, I held up one hand. Then I said, "You worry about the jobs. I'll worry about the paperwork." The same words, same order, same sentence. The color left his face the way heat leaves a room when you open a door in winter. He looked at the papers again. He looked at the mug. He did not look at me. I told him the business account had been transferred. I told him the partnership was dissolved. I told him he had until end of business today to remove his personal belongings. I told him he could sign the dissolution agreement now, or I would file the fraud documentation with the county prosecutor and the state contractor licensing board in the morning. I set a pen on the desk. Derek picked up the pen. He signed. He did not say anything. I picked up the file box and the signed agreement. I walked out. I did not say goodbye. I drove to the Vol Tech. It was Monday, not Thursday, but I had borrowed a set of conduit benders for a demonstration the previous week and needed to return them. I carried them inside, set them in the equipment room, and came back out to the parking lot. Phil Kerrigan was there, loading gear into his white Ford Transit, rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. St. Joseph bolted to the dash. I had known Phil for 20 years. We worked the same job site back in 2009. He looked up and asked if I had work coming up. I told him I just lost a partner and could use the help. Phil said, "I can start Monday if you need the help." I said, "Monday if you need the help." I said Monday worked. I got in my truck. The 1996 DeWalt drill was in the passenger seat where it always is. Battery barely holding a charge. The chuck worn smooth on one side from decades of use. I moved it to the back seat to make room for the file box and drove home. Cold morning air was coming through the cracked window the way it does in early March before the weather makes up its mind. I thought about a man named Derek Pullman, who had spent 11 months betting that a 64-year-old electrician with a tool belt wouldn't look at the paperwork. I pulled into the driveway. I left the file box in the truck. I went inside and made coffee. Some men take from the people who trust them because they believe that trust is the same as blindness. They are wrong about that. Trust is a choice. Attention is a habit, and a habit kept long enough becomes the thing that saves you.